Several students and a teacher go on a field trip in the wilderness of the Indonesian jungle. However, spirits inhabited the region and began corrupting the youth, possessing them and eventually killing them all but one, Linda. Little did she know, however, that by saving herself and by growing into her supernatural abilities, she also possibly doomed the world. Not knowing that the teacher had also set these children up as sacrifices so she could obtain a mystical snake, the world eater, and a bringer of death. Haunted by the nightmares of her past, can Linda form a new life for herself, or will she be beckoned to stop the supernatural forces that she helped unleash herself? This is Dreadout 2, and all the events I just mentioned happened in Dreadout 1. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Lazy Day. Before we get started here, I've heard that the YouTube algorithm responds pretty well if you ask for subscriptions in the beginning. So if you guys don't mind hitting that subscription button and hitting the notification bell or just giving the video a like, every little bit helps a small channel out like me. Today we're talking about Dreadout 2 for the Nintendo Switch. This game just came out yesterday. I've been playing it actually for like 2 weeks now. So a big thank you to the developer for providing me with a copy. And let's start talking about it. This is a horror survival game, and I'll be totally honest, I love watching playthroughs of horror games, but I rarely play any of them myself, especially for review purposes. I think the most recent thing I did was like play Dead Space around the time that they announced the remaster, because I wasn't going to pay for the remaster when I already have the game. As for actually completing a horror game within recent memory, maybe Evil Within. That would probably be the most recent one that comes to mind. So come with me while I shake off the cobwebs and, put on my big boy pants and play Dreadout 2. Dreadout 2 is a horror survival game set in Indonesia where you use light and photography as a primary means of defense. You play as Linda, a young high schooler who is at the center of the horrific massacre in the jungle that I mentioned earlier, and is still obviously haunted by it even years later. Having cleared her name and working closely with the police since the incident, Linda is still attending classes at school and trying to behave like a normal teenager. Apparently though, the school is additionally marred by the haunting of several spirits, but she's still experiencing these psychotic episodes where she's almost sent into this weird realm, almost similar to Silent Hill, where she can see and even interact with physical and non-physical beings. The initial opening to the game gives you a good idea of the setup to the story, as well as just a good bit of basic information regarding the previous game, while getting you familiar with the mechanics regarding the light and the camera usage. It's actually pretty well thought out. This opening actually kind of had me lost for a good half hour though. I didn't understand what I needed to do because at times the objectives can be incredibly vague. But after that, you finish the objective and you're whisked away to the present day. You wake up from your dream in Linda's apartment. And thankfully, it's not just an apartment. There's actually an entire city outside of this area, and you're given the chance to explore the downtown through a couple quick but necessary missions. I gotta admit, I was really impressed with the scope of the game considering its smaller budget. The town actually feels alive with street vendors and musicians and these birds and constant scooters whizzing up and down the street. I would say my only gripe with these large play areas were the absurd amount of pop-in, and maybe this is only something that the Nintendo Switch has a problem with, but large buildings would disappear entirely, only to come back with just the slightest adjustment of the view. We're talking 5 degrees or less, and all of a sudden a whole building would pop back into view. I just kind of found it strange because the rest of it looked fine. Just as a quick side note, going back to Linda's apartment, I absolutely love how the landlord won't hesitate to just bop Linda for putting a phone in her face, something that most NPCs in the game will absolutely tolerate, but not this lady. Gameplay is actually rather simple and very akin to Fatal Frame. In fact, I feel a lot of the inspiration from this comes from Silent Hill, and then a lot of the gameplay stuff feels like it comes from Fatal Frame. But I never really played those games either, so that's just from an observation. I could totally be wrong. I almost played the one that came out on the Wii U. I almost imported that, and maybe that's something we could do for a different video. We can revisit that another time. I do want to say navigation is actually kind of easy, and the character is really responsive. Meaning when you look up, the character looks up and even points her phone in the same direction so the light follows where you're looking. It's a small little detail that I did find to be actually kind of cool. Your sprint also doubles as a dodge mechanic during combat scenarios because apparently we're not Chris Redfield with massive arms and like tons of combat experience. You're like a young little kawaii girl, so you don't get a fun dodge mechanic, okay? Unfortunately, the missions can be incredibly vague, as I mentioned earlier, meaning you'll be kind of wandering around, checking every corner until you find that one thing that correlates to the half-sentence note that you put down on your phone, and I guarantee you will walk past that objective several times without realizing that's what you needed to stop and like click on. It is a little infuriating on that end. Combat is incredibly chunky, the chunkiest of peanut butters, but I believe that's for the purpose of suspense and tension building during fights. Again, we're not beefy man Chris Redfield. We're not really gonna like muscle around these guys. We really have to struggle to take a monster down. Spirits and monsters really kind of just chug along slowly towards you, giving you ample time to stun them with the light and then exchange a few quick hits before going back to like evasive maneuvers. But this is particularly for the physical entities. Most of the physical entities move at a slower pace, where a lot of the non-physical entities can move very quickly. In fact, that first boss fight, I was just struggling to keep my eye on the spirit because he was just zipping around the room. Otherwise, when it comes to the physical beings, I found myself kind of circle training like COD zombies to restructure which monsters I'd have to strike first within my vicinity. And monsters, once they are defeated, they're just logged into something called your Ghostopedia in your phone. So you can always look at them later. And it's cool because there's a lot of cultural backing to those. You can always look them up and there's probably other stories that go with them. So it's cool to see how they kind of blended those into the game. I will say, the game and its story are incredibly brief, but I always view that as a positive. That is a consistent opinion throughout my videos so far. I'm okay with playing shorter titles. Not only does it keep me productive in terms of just keeping reviews steady and achievable within a week or so time, it's also just more enjoyable because I don't have all the time in the world. Life's responsibilities become more important, and I'm really lucky to get more than just like 1 or 2 hours in an evening that I could use for gaming. There's other things I could be doing, but I maybe get 1 or 2 hours of flex time that I could game. Dreadout 2's campaign is about 10 hours or so, depending on how long you get lost looking around for objectives or just taking in the scenery and stuff like that. I really think Dreadout 2's biggest draw is its charm and its tension building. Is it a perfect game? No, but it's obvious where the game draws its inspiration, and it's really cool to see a return to an older version of horror. We've kind of seen this new evolution of horror where everything's either survival horror like Outlast, or it's more like Resident Evil, and even Resident Evil's borrowing from Outlast now. The cutscenes, the gameplay, the graphics, they all really remind me of something that I would have seen on the PlayStation 2, and I really don't mean that negatively at all. It gives off this vibe that the goal was to do just that, and it pulls it off wonderfully. I mean, hell, I spent a large portion of the game just taking photos of normal things, goofing around in the limited play area they did give you. There's so much life to the city and the surrounding areas that you'll find something charming enough to snap a photo of. I think some people may look at this game and see the chunkiness of it as a negative, and never really look at it twice. But I do think players who grew up on PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 will be kinder to its presentation. It's almost like we don't need vastly expanding play spaces with things to do here and there intermittently, but instead just like a condensed experience that feels alive in itself. Is Dreadout 2 a perfect game? No. Is that a question I keep asking and answering? Yes. But what it does manage to pull off really harkens back to classic horror games that we've drifted so far away from, and I'm perfectly okay with that. It stays in line with what we've come to expect from the first title, and thankfully it's all here at once, unlike the first one that released in 2 parts. I loved Dreadout 2 for what it is. It's not going to win everyone over. Some people will look at it once and pass, and I do say to those people that you're missing out on a really cool story here. And yes, it's unfortunate that it's mucked down by its visuals and sometimes rocky mechanics, but the developer has a devotion and talent geared towards these games and stories. And apparently it's good enough that there was even a movie adaptation of Dreadout 1's plot. I'm not really sure what that's about, but I'll be damned if I can't say I wasn't really intrigued by Dreadout 2's story. And I swear I didn't cry or scream once. I promise. You can trust me on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this review, feel free to hit that like button, and if you're feeling extra generous, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I am a small and growing channel. However, I do upload videos weekly, and I'm really having fun with it. It's really nice to see that people are watching, and there is some engagement here and there. So I just noticed that like 99% of the people that do watch aren't subscribed, so you know, if you want to help me out, that would be super appreciated. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, you have a good one.